Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at setting up our cam and crank pattern and sensor configuration for a Hall effect style sensor in our Motec M1 software. Now we're going to be dealing with two types of potential cam and crank sensors fitted to our engine. One's going to be a Hall effect and one is going to be a VR magnetic. This tutorial is going to be just covering Hall effect style sensors. Now, how do we tell the difference between a Hall effect and a magnetic style sensor? It's quite easy. If we take a look here at the schematic, we're going to find a Hall effect sensor will have three wires typically. One will be a power, the other will be a sensor ground, and the third will be our signal out. Now what you'll notice is that a Hall effect sensor is going to produce a square wave out, usually 0 to 5 volt pulse, and we're going to find the opposite is going to hold true with a VR or magnetic sensor. We're going to find on a VR magnetic sensor, you're looking at the sensor itself, you'll see there's two wires, and there's going to be a negative and a positive lead for the wiring going from the sensor into the Motec. You'll find that the output from a VR magnetic sensor is going to be a sinusoidal wave. And the difference between the two sensor outputs is that when we have engine speed increasing with a VR magnetic sensor, we're going to find that sinusoidal wave grows in amplitude. So the voltage amplitude of that sinusoidal wave will start to increase as engine speed increases. Low engine speed is going to decrease. When we're talking about a Hall effect style sensor with that square wave pulsed output, we'll find that we have more of those pulse outputs in a given amount of time as engine speed increases. And likewise, we're going to have less pulses within the same amount of time as the engine speed decreases. So that's the primary differences when we're talking about a Hall effect or a VR magnetic style sensor. So again, what we're dealing with here in this tutorial is a Hall effect sensor setup for our cam and crank configuration. Now let's jump in here and take a look. Now we know the basics. Take a look here at setting up the cam and crank pattern, and then we're going to take a look at going through some of the settings and the specifics when we're dealing with a Hall effect sensor for all of the variables and conditions we have to account for. Let's jump in here and take a look under a custom workbook area. We're going to go from our tuning workbook over here to setup, and then we're going to jump right in here to our ref sync. This is where we're going to be configuring everything for the cam and crank pattern that we're dealing with, as well as the Hall effect style sensors. So all of the configuration details that we find in here need to be accounted for the engine to fire up and run on the Motec. What we're trying to achieve here is going up to our engine speed reference state. We want to see this show cycle lock if everything is properly being configured here. That means that the Motec's understanding the cam and crank pattern that's being produced as the engine is cranking over or if it's running, and it's going to be firing the coil and injectors at the appropriate times, and the engine's going to run correctly. If we don't achieve this reference state showing cycle lock, the Motec will not fire the coil and injectors, and that means that there's a problem with our configuration settings in here somewhere, and we need to resolve them. We're going to go through all of our details here in this tutorial, so you'll have a good idea of what to expect. Now, when we're talking about setting up our engine speed reference mode and our engine synchronization mode here, we need to account for the cam and crank pattern that the sensors are outputting. This will vary based on the type of engine you're tuning. So if you're dealing with, let's say, a OEM engine that's using OEM cam and crank sensors and signals coming out of those sensors, you'll find that you can set that in your engine speed reference mode here in your dropdown in this long list of engines right here. We're going to find something like a Lamborghini V10 engine that's going to have a very unique pattern that we have to only be able to select with this option here. You may also be in a situation where you have a generic pattern. You may have fitted your engine with aftermarket cam and crank sensors and trigger wheels, and in that situation we would use our generic options up here. So we're going to find multi-tooth options or one missing options. These are very common options. So for example, a Toyota Supra would be 24 even teeth on our trigger and then one tooth on the home or the synchronization, as we're going to call it, which is found on the cam. We might find that you also have a pattern such as a 36 missing 2 on your crank trigger, and then you may also have a +1 on your home or synchronization. So you'll find that you're going to have kind of these different options. If you have an OEM pattern, you'll select in your drop down here your engine that you're dealing with if you're running all the OEM sensors and pickup wheels, If you're dealing with more of a custom application where you're fitting it with aftermarket trigger wheels and aftermarket sensors, you'll be choosing possibly one of your other options here. Either going to have multi-tooth option, or we're going to have a one missing option as well. So there's again some options to select in here. Now my particular engine that I'm dealing with here for this demonstration is going to have a 12-tooth trigger wheel, missing one, and then I have +1 on the home or the synchronization. So that's the pattern I'm dealing with. Now how did I figure out what that pattern is? Well, I could go in and actually count the teeth in the engine on the trigger wheel and on the home trigger wheel inside the engine. So you'll see, if you open up everything and take a look, you'll find that that pattern exists. I don't need to open up the engine to go and figure out what my pattern is going to be, so I can select it in my drop-down menu here. What I can do is use our scope trace option in the software and be able to actually see and count how many teeth. Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.